Joe DiMaggio opened his locker at Yankee Stadium on September 15, 1951, and found a photo of his 78-year-old mother sitting in her San Francisco kitchen with a bullet hole punched through her forehead. Attached was a handwritten note: "Throw tonight's game or she's next. You have 6 hours. Vincent Torrino." But what the most feared Mafia boss in New York didn't know was that threatening Joe DiMaggio's family would destroy his criminal empire and force him to apologize to a baseball player on live television while 60 million Americans watched. This is the story of how Joe DiMaggio turned a death threat into the most humiliating defeat in organized crime history. 3 months earlier, May 1951, Vincent the Shark Torrino ran New York's biggest crime family. He controlled restaurants, construction companies, and gambling operations worth millions of dollars. Vincent had successfully intimidated boxers, horse racing jockeys, and college basketball players. Now he wanted to control America's greatest baseball hero. Joe DiMaggio represented everything Vincent couldn't buy. Joe had integrity. He had honor. He had a perfect reputation that had never been tainted by scandal or compromise. If Vincent could control Joe DiMaggio, he could prove that even America's biggest heroes could be bought by criminals. Vincent had studied Joe for months, looking for weaknesses. He learned about Joe's family, his routines, his values. Vincent understood that Joe cared more about family and honor than money or fame. That's why Vincent decided to make Joe an offer that combined business with barely hidden threats. Vincent sent his most persuasive enforcer, Tommy the Voice Benedetto, to make Joe an offer. Tommy had convinced other athletes to cooperate through a combination of money and fear. He was confident Joe would be no different. Tommy met Joe at Toots Shor's restaurant in Manhattan on a Tuesday evening. Joe was eating his usual steak dinner when Tommy slid into the booth across from him without invitation. "Mr. DiMaggio," Tommy said with a practiced smile, "my employer is a great admirer of your work. Vincent Torrino, maybe you've heard the name, very successful businessman in the city." Joe looked up from his dinner. "I know who Vincent Torrino is. What does he want?" "My boss has a simple business proposition for you," Tommy continued. "We're not asking you to lose games or damage your reputation. Just make small adjustments sometimes. Strike out when it doesn't matter to the final score. Drop easy catches when the game is already decided. Nothing that would hurt your statistics or legacy." Joe set down his fork and knife, wiped his mouth with his napkin, and looked directly at Tommy. "Tell your boss that Joe DiMaggio doesn't make deals with criminals. I play baseball with complete integrity, and that's never going to change." Tommy's friendly expression faded slightly. "My boss thought you might need some encouragement to see the benefits of cooperation. He wants you to think about your family's safety and well-being. Your mother living alone in San Francisco. Your brothers who own small businesses that depend on city permits and inspector approvals." The restaurant continued buzzing with conversation around them, but Joe's focus narrowed completely on Tommy's words. In 15 years of professional baseball, no one had ever threatened Joe's family. The suggestion hit him like a physical blow, but Joe's expression remained calm and controlled. Joe stood up slowly, placed exact change for his meal on the table, and looked down at Tommy with quiet intensity. "Your boss just made the biggest mistake of his criminal career," Joe said in a voice that carried absolute certainty. "He threatened my family. Now he's going to learn what happens when someone makes that choice. Tell Vincent Torrino that he just declared war on the wrong person." Tommy tried to maintain his composure, but something in Joe's calm confidence made him nervous. "Mr. DiMaggio, my employer has dealt with much tougher men than baseball players. I suggest you reconsider very carefully." "Tell your boss I'm done reconsidering anything," Joe replied. "He'll hear from me soon. And when he does, he's going to regret the day he decided to threaten an American family." June 1951. Vincent began his campaign against Joe's family with systematic precision. Within a week, city health inspectors suddenly discovered violations at Joe's brother Dom's restaurant that had never existed before. Dom was forced to close for 3 days and pay hefty fines for problems that mysteriously appeared overnight. Joe's brother Tom, who ran a small construction company, found his city contracts canceled without explanation. When Tom asked for reasons, officials told him there were concerns about his family's associations with undesirable elements. Tom lost $25,000 in guaranteed work within 2 weeks. Vincent's message was clear: cooperate with our demands or watch your family's lives be systematically destroyed through bureaucratic harassment they couldn't fight or prove was criminal. But Vincent had never faced anyone like Joe DiMaggio. Instead of being intimidated into submission, Joe became coldly determined to fight back using his greatest weapon, his unmatched baseball skills and national platform. Joe made a carefully planned phone call to FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. They had worked together during World War II when Joe volunteered to visit military bases and boost soldier morale during America's darkest hours. "Mr. Hoover," Joe said, "organized crime representatives have threatened my family and are attacking my brother's businesses. But I don't just want to report this to the FBI. I want to propose something that could be much more effective than traditional law enforcement." Hoover was immediately interested. The FBI had been struggling for years to successfully prosecute major crime figures through conventional methods. "What's your idea, Joe?" "Help me learn when Vincent Torrino's organization is betting against me in baseball games. Then I'll deliberately play better than they expect and cost them enormous amounts of money. I'll prove that American heroes can't be intimidated while bankrupting his operation through my own excellence." The FBI saw the brilliance in Joe's plan immediately. They called it Operation Home Run, the first time in American history that athletic performance would be used as a weapon against organized crime. July and August 1951. The FBI's Organized Crime Unit shared detailed information about Vincent's gambling operations with Joe. FBI agents had been monitoring Vincent's bookmakers for months, learning exactly when and how they placed bets on professional baseball games. Vincent's system was sophisticated but predictable. His bookmakers would study Joe's recent performance statistics, calculate probability based on historical patterns, then place large bets based on what they expected Joe to do in specific game situations. But Joe turned Vincent's mathematical approach against him. When Vincent's men expected Joe to have an ordinary game, Joe played spectacularly. When they predicted he would struggle in pressure situations, Joe delivered clutch performances. When they bet he would make routine errors, Joe made impossible defensive plays that saved games. Every time Joe exceeded statistical expectations, Vincent's organization lost massive amounts of money. The losses weren't small, they were devastating hits that other crime families began to notice and discuss. In just 2 months, Joe's athletic excellence cost Vincent over $200,000, more money than many legitimate businesses earned in entire years. "This is impossible," Vincent complained during a heated meeting with his lieutenant Sal Romano at his private social club. "DiMaggio seems to know exactly when we're betting against him. Every time we place significant money based on his statistics, he has his best games of the season." Sal was equally frustrated. "Maybe he has inside information about our betting operations." Vincent shook his head angrily. "Impossible. Only our inner circle knows our betting patterns." But somehow, DiMaggio consistently delivers his most spectacular performances at the exact moments when it costs us the most money. What Vincent couldn't understand was that Joe's seemingly supernatural performance wasn't based on luck or inside information. It was precision psychological warfare that used athletic excellence as a financial weapon against criminal interests. August 15, 1951. Joe delivered his most devastating message during the Yankees' crucial game against the Boston Red Sox. Vincent's organization had placed their largest single bet of the entire season, confidently expecting Joe to have a normal game based on his historical performance against Boston pitching. Instead of meeting expectations, Joe destroyed them completely. He hit 3 towering home runs, drove in 7 runs, made 2 impossible defensive plays that saved the game, and led the Yankees to a dramatic 9-4 victory that left Boston's players shaking their heads in amazement. Vincent's organization lost $75,000 in one afternoon, a financial catastrophe that sent shock waves through New York's organized crime community. After the game, Joe gave what appeared to be a routine interview to sports reporters, but his words carried a message that Vincent Torrino would understand perfectly. "Baseball is fundamentally about integrity and character," Joe told the assembled press. "It's about performing your absolute best when the stakes are highest, especially when people are counting on you to fail or expecting you to compromise your principles. Real champions demonstrate their greatest excellence precisely when the pressure is most intense and when others doubt their commitment to doing what's right." When Vincent read that interview in the next morning's newspaper, he understood that Joe DiMaggio was declaring open war on his criminal organization. But Vincent had never encountered an enemy who fought with excellence instead of violence, who used athletic achievement as a weapon against criminal interests. September 1, 1951, 2 weeks before the death threat photo, Vincent made the decision that would destroy his criminal career forever. If financial pressure and family intimidation couldn't force Joe DiMaggio into submission, Vincent would escalate to direct death threats against Joe's mother. "I'm done playing games with this baseball player," Vincent told Sal Romano during an emergency meeting. "DiMaggio thinks he's smarter than Vincent Torrino. He thinks he can cost us money and embarrass us in front of other crime families. Tomorrow he learns that nobody is bigger than Vincent Torrino." Sal looked worried. "Boss, maybe we should try a different approach. Every move we make against DiMaggio seems to backfire and cost us more money and respect." But Vincent's pride and reputation had been wounded by Joe's systematic campaign. "DiMaggio has humiliated me for the last time. If he won't cooperate with reasonable business arrangements, he'll cooperate with direct threats against his family's lives." Vincent made the biggest mistake of his criminal career. He didn't understand that Joe DiMaggio represented more than just individual athletic excellence. Joe embodied American values of integrity, courage, and family loyalty that couldn't be threatened, purchased, or compromised by any criminal organization. September 15, 1951, 2:30 p.m., 6 hours before game time. Joe found the photo of his mother with the bullet hole and the threatening note in his locker. He stared at the image for exactly 30 seconds, feeling a cold anger that was different from anything he had experienced in his athletic career. The photo had been taken recently. His mother was wearing a dress he had bought her for her birthday just last month. The bullet hole was perfectly placed through her forehead, clearly created by someone who knew how to send messages that couldn't be misunderstood or ignored. Joe picked up the clubhouse phone and dialed a number that would change both his life and the future of organized crime in America. "Mr. Hoover," Joe said when FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover answered personally, "Vincent Torrino just made the biggest mistake of his criminal career. He threatened to kill my mother if I don't throw tonight's game. I want you to come to the stadium and watch how America responds to terrorism." "What do you need from the Bureau?" Hoover asked immediately. "I need you to sit behind home plate tonight. I want you to witness Vincent Torrino learning that some people are too American to be intimidated by criminals. And I want you to see what happens when organized crime threatens the wrong family." By pure coincidence, Hoover was already planning to attend the Yankees game that evening as part of a federal program designed to demonstrate that American institutions couldn't be corrupted by criminal influences. Now the evening would become something far more significant: a public confrontation between American values and organized crime intimidation. 3 p.m., 5 hours before game time. Joe walked into Yankees manager Casey Stengel's office, carrying the photograph and death threat note. Casey had managed Joe for 3 seasons and had never seen such controlled determination in his star player's expression. "Casey," Joe said, placing the evidence on Stengel's desk, "Vincent Torrino just threatened to kill my mother if I don't throw tonight's game. I want you to understand that I'm going to respond to this threat in a way that ends this situation permanently and sends a message to every criminal organization in America." Casey studied the photo and note, his expression hardening with anger and disgust. "What do you need from the team?" "I need you to trust me completely," Joe replied. "Put me in every situation where I can demonstrate that threatening American families is the biggest mistake any criminal can make. Tonight we're not just playing baseball. We're defending the principle that American heroes can't be intimidated by terrorists." 7:30 p.m., 30 minutes before first pitch. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover took his seat directly behind home plate, surrounded by federal agents who had been briefed on the evening's significance. Vincent Torrino arrived with 3 bodyguards and took prominent seats in Section 12, where Joe would be able to see him clearly throughout the entire game. What Vincent didn't realize was that his arrival was being photographed by FBI surveillance teams, his identity was being documented by federal investigators, and his presence at the ballpark was providing prosecutors with evidence of criminal conspiracy and witness intimidation. The stadium was packed with 67,000 fans who had no idea they were about to witness the most important confrontation between American values and organized crime in the country's history. 8:15 p.m., bottom of the first inning. Joe DiMaggio stepped up to bat for his first at-bat of the evening. He looked directly at Vincent Torrino in the stands, then turned to home plate umpire Bill Summers and spoke loud enough for the stadium microphones to pick up his words and broadcast them across the entire country. "Bill, I want to dedicate this game to my mother in San Francisco and to every American family that refuses to be intimidated by criminals who think fear is stronger than courage." The crowd of 67,000 people erupted in thunderous applause that seemed to shake the entire stadium. Joe looked directly at Vincent and smiled, not with fear or nervousness, but with the calm confidence of a man who was about to deliver an unforgettable lesson in American values. Washington Senators pitcher Early Wynn threw his first pitch, a fastball right down the middle that he intended as a strike. Joe DiMaggio hit it 420 feet into the left field, stands for a towering home run that brought every fan in Yankee Stadium to their feet. As Joe rounded the bases in front of 67,000 cheering Americans, he looked directly at Vincent Torrino and tipped his cap, not as a gesture of respect, but as acknowledgement that Vincent's death threat had just been answered with excellence. Vincent realized in that moment that his carefully planned intimidation had backfired completely. His death threat had been answered with athletic brilliance in front of 67,000 witnesses, a national radio audience, and the director of the FBI. Third inning. The Yankees were losing 3-1 when Joe came to bat with 2 runners on base and the game's momentum hanging in balance. Instead of simply stepping into the batter's box, Joe called timeout and walked toward Vincent's section in the stands. The entire stadium fell silent as Joe spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "My mother taught me that real men protect their families. She also taught me that Americans don't negotiate with criminals or terrorists. This home run is dedicated to every family in America that refuses to be threatened by cowards." Joe returned to the batter's box and, on the second pitch from relief pitcher Bob Porterfield, hit a 3-run homer that put the Yankees ahead 4-3 and sent the crowd into a frenzy of patriotic celebration. The stadium literally shook from the crowd's reaction, but the real earthquake was happening within Vincent Torrino's criminal organization and throughout New York's organized crime community. Every major crime family in New York was listening to the radio broadcast. They heard Joe DiMaggio publicly identify Vincent as a criminal who threatened American families. They heard 67,000 Americans cheering for a baseball player who had just declared open war on organized crime, and they understood immediately that Vincent's public humiliation was bringing unprecedented and dangerous federal attention to all their operations. By the end of the 4th inning, crime bosses throughout the city were making emergency phone calls, distancing themselves from Vincent to protect their own organizations from similar federal scrutiny. Final score: Yankees 7, Washington 3. Joe DiMaggio finished the game with 4 hits, 6 RBIs, and 2 spectacular defensive plays that brought the crowd to their feet repeatedly. But the real victory was already happening in newspaper offices across America, where reporters were writing stories that would make Vincent Torrino the most hunted criminal in the country. September 16, 1951, morning headlines across America. Every major newspaper in the country carried the same front-page story: DiMaggio defies Mafia death threat, and America's hero answers criminals with home runs. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover held a press conference that morning that transformed Vincent's personal threat against Joe DiMaggio into a federal case that would change the relationship between organized crime and American athletics forever.